Hello everyone! Today we are going to be doing anatomy, but of course we also did a community poll as to what you guys would like to see me do specifically with anatomy, and that turned out to be proportions and how do I get them right. Now, fair warning that this this one's gonna be a lot of measurements, so we're gonna get straight into that as soon as we can. If you did not know, even though we are a YouTube channel, we are also a art school, so you can check out our link in the description for our website, so you can check out our classes. So anatomy usually means relativity when it comes to measurements. When I say relativity, that means we are going to be measuring with different body parts to be in relative scale to one another. So we'll start with adults. Now, if you didn't know, the body is measured in heads, and that's why we draw people starting with the head, right? And depending on the age of the person, the measurement of their heads will change. So let's start by drawing a head. Now, you can usually draw the head, and we like to call this the ball and shield, right? So it's like a circle, and then almost like a shield shape for our chin. I'm gonna kind of go off of an adult male. I'm gonna take this head. Control-C, Control-V it, so I can have it off to the side here. So the male body is usually 7 to 7.5 heads tall, so we're just going to measure that out. So the body is approximately this tall. The body is measured in heads, and all anatomy measurements are based on relativity. And always keep in mind as well that every single thing when it comes to measurements in anatomy is approximate. It's approximate and an average. So this is not true for everyone. In fact, it's rarely true for everyone. Every person is different. So the neck, when we come down from the head, the neck is about a third to a half the length of the head. Another thing to note as well that generally, so this is 7.5, so that means that 3 3/4, so that's about halfway. Whoops. So this would be about halfway. So that would be approximately where the hips would start. This would be approximately where the feet would end. Right, and of course this is where the top of the head starts. The shoulder width for the adult man is approximately 2 heads wide. So the shoulder width is approximately this width. I'm just going to erase, draw it in. Normally you can also draw it, if you're going with the very, very basic shapes, you can draw the upper shape as a trapezoid. But if you're starting out with anatomy, you can start with the super basic shape, the upper torso. Like the chest area can be drawn as like a trapezoid. So the center section here is so kind of the stomach area. I kind of tend to piece it all together into one shape. You can either have it as a rectangle, or if you want to fill out the stomach more, you can draw it more as an oval. Depends on how you're feeling. I'm going to stick to a rectangle. Here's where it kind of deviates between men and women when it comes to our hips, which biologically, they tend to be different. The hips equals width, or smaller width than chest. So approximately there would be the max that it would go out to, so I'm probably just going to stick with going straight down. So again, at the widest point, the hips should generally be either similar width or smaller. So let's move on to the legs. With anything that comes in pairs, should be drawn at the same time, which means that if you have one section of a leg, then you draw that same section of the leg on the next leg at the same time. So we want to make sure that if we draw one thigh, then we want to go on to the next thigh. We draw one calf, we want to go on to the next calf. Alright, so for the thighs, we can do those first. So for this one, you can kind of think of it as a rectangle. If I draw the shape off to the side, it's almost like a slightly curved rectangle with one side angled to fit the shape of the underwear. So for the knees you can, they're different depending on who you ask, right? I tend to like to draw them in an elongated hexagon because I like to be very geometric. So with calves, if I were to do it kind of quickly, you never want to forget the calf muscles because they're very, very concentrated, right? If you kind of tense your muscles there, you'll probably be able to feel your calf muscles because they're quite strong. Yes, so when it comes to the calf, right, the outer muscle tends to be higher than the inner muscle. If I was to draw it as a very harsh geometric shape, which would be kind of this coffin shape, it would be kind of like this, right? Because the ankle doesn't really have any muscle or fat or anything like that. You can feel your ankle bones very, very clearly. That's why they're very thin at the ends of your legs. Feet are incredibly easy. Let me show you why. So your ankle can be drawn as a circle. Your heel can be drawn as a trapezoid. The midsection of your foot can be drawn as a triangle connected to that one. And then the toes can be drawn as a semicircle. Connect all those up, and you've got yourself a perfect shoe. That's literally it. That's all it takes, right? And the best thing about this is you can draw those shapes in different angles, right? If you place them differently, depending on how you place these shapes, you can have shoes drawn in different angles. So let's move back onto the feet. So these 2 feet are both going to be going directly from the front. So that means that we just got to draw all of our shapes stacked directly in front of each other. Just like that. But yes, for arms, I'm going to show you another trick for arms when you want to do them in certain positions, but let's do one that's directly on the side. So I'll have this one waving or something. This one will be directly to the side. So that means I am going to do one after the other, but normally you don't want to do that, especially if they're in the same position. When you draw an arm that is straight down to the sides, what you can actually do as a test, but if you want to stand up, put your arms directly to your sides, you can actually measure this yourself. Your elbows, if you kind of draw a fake line across your body, you'll notice that your elbow kind of lines up either with your belly button or right above your belly button. And you'll notice that the tips of your fingers either go about halfway to a third down your thighs. Right, so your fingertip tend to end around here, right, kind of in that area, and your elbow tends to line up the middle of your torso. Draw the belly button real quick. Your arm, your upper arm or your bicep, which you can kind of draw as, again, kind of a rounded cylinder, rectangle, kind of ends around at the belly button there. So that's kind of where your elbow goes. All your joints can be drawn as circles. And kind of the same deal with the calf, but this time your forearm muscles are equal on both sides. So you can kind of just draw this one as a baseball bat instead. So if you kind of think of that, same shape. Your wrist can be another circle. But say we want this arm to be waving. So we want to start with the wrist, right? The wrist can be drawn as a circle, same with the shoulder. And let's draw just a hand. They don't have to do anything crazy, just kind of draw a mitten. That should be fine. Right? Just make sure that we have these 2 circles. You can see them very clearly. If you draw a dot in the center of both of these circles, connect them with a straight line, and then draw a perpendicular line. If you don't know what that is, it is another straight line that goes directly through the first one in the middle at 90 degrees. So 90 degrees is a perfect corner. And then kind of based off of these measurements, draw another circle for your elbow and just connect them. That's your arm in proportion. This will work foolproof every single time unless if the arm is in perspective. So it will work every single time unless if the arm is foreshortened. Same deal as the man, ball and shield. Depending on the woman, of course, you can make her features a little bit softer if you would like. This is not the same for everybody, of course. There we go. So not quite as tall as a man. Now when we draw the woman's chest, it can be the same trapezoid shape, of course. The chest length for a woman tends to be 1 to 1.5 heads, I believe. Then again, you can kind of draw the upper torso. I'm going to just adjust the shoulders a little bit here, so they sweep down a little bit more. So again, depending on how strong the individual is, that's how wide you want the chest to be. The upper torso. And again, this will change. This will change as well, depending on the type of person that you are drawing. Right, so we can flare out the hips a little bit more here. So this is considered an hourglass kind of body type, but not everybody has an hourglass, so we need to keep that in mind when we're doing body type. Legs are the same deal, basically the exact same deal. So again, kind of this shape, or the legs. So again, the upper thigh. It's just kind of this calves. You can smooth these muscles out a little bit more as well. Again, very generally men tend to be more toned because based on testosterone, it is easier for them to build up muscle mass. Same coffin shape, or same hexagon shape for the knees. Let me draw the feet in too because it's exactly the same. Let's do 2 hands on hips, right? We want to draw our shoulders and the wrists first. And you'll notice I'm doing them at the exact same time because it's in the same pose, right? So again, draw the dot, either one, have a line connecting both, a perpendicular line going through each of those, and then we can draw the rest of them. This is a very strong kind of pose, But you notice how similar the men and the women are? There really isn't that much difference. It's just measurements that are a little bit different. How do you draw chibi poses? Here's the thing with chibis. A chibi anatomy is very non-anatomy. It's a very stylized form of anatomy. So like the head is like the size of the body is what I always tell my students. Chibis also differ depending on the person that draws them. Right, so for me, I tend to draw the body as like a bean. And each limb is like just a rounded oval. Just like an oval, and then you can add on the extra bits of the limbs. They're very, very baby-like. Babies are quite similar to chibis. Alright, so child, kid, or teenagers are hard because they're in that stage between adulthood. The thing with kids is that their heads tend to be very squished. So you can draw most kid heads as like quite small. A lot of kids you can say are about 5-ish heads tall. So top of the head here, bottom of the feet should go here. And because it's 5 divided by 2, 2.5. So that's approximately midway through there is where the hips should go. Of course, all depends on the kid. Not always the same. Some people have longer legs than the others. The chest for a child is approximately 1 head across. So you can just kind of do that. The neck is going to be quite thin, but the same deal. It's like approximately half the size of the head. So even like which adult measurement they're more close to, it's men. So their hips would be approximately the same width or smaller when it comes to children. And also know that children, I usually combine the midsection with the pelvis just because they are so similar. Because children do tend to still have baby fat. So their whole bodies can be drawn as just like one big rectangle. And the legs are the same deal, though generally I tend to draw children's legs as a lot thinner because they haven't quite grown out muscle yet. But it is the same deal. Outer muscle, much thicker than much higher than the inner muscle of the calf legs. Feet are exactly the same 4 shapes. So circle for the ankle, triangle for the midsection of the foot, and semicircle for the toes. And arms are exactly the same again. 2 shoulders. I'm going to draw the 2 wrists. Both hands are going to be waving this time. And again, notice that I'm doing every single piece at the exact same time. Right? This is the same kind of deal. Children's limbs tend to be quite thin. That's one kind of thing I want to point out. Is that, but their midsection is quite filled out because they still have baby fat. This one, with a very heavy grain of salt. That does not always apply to everybody, right? Limbs tend to be thin does not apply to everybody, of course, but compared to an adult man and adult woman, they are not as filled out because their muscles have not developed quite as much. Now, when it comes to doing a character that is more stylized, all these measurements that I just talked to you about can be disregarded. In stylization, you don't really need to worry about any of these measurements because things will change and things will move around, right? That's the joys of adding style. Should you still know them? Yes, it is very, very important so that you know how you're bending so you don't bend too far, or that you still know the rule set for each age group and each gender and whatever you're doing. With stylization, though, for me, I tend to stylize by drawing very, very bendy limbs. But when it comes to stylization and poses and all that, generally it's all about exaggerating what you like to do. I tend to be very, very bendy when it comes to drawing characters. I tend to exaggerate legs, I tend to exaggerate poses. Here's an example of where that this arm is foreshortened up in the forearm. So here's an example of where that the cross method would not work. So we're going to draw one character who is with more realistic proportions, and another character without realistic proportions. Their anatomy compared to like how you would do it someone a little more realistically. So I'm going to draw an adult male, but I'll talk about how I would change certain aspects. So an adult male, again, let's start with the head. The chin will start midway through this circle that you've drawn first when you draw your ball and shield. At the back of your neck will come down from this first circle that you've drawn midway through there. And never forget your Adam's apple if it is a man. So our neck again, kind of about half the size of the head. I'm going to draw kind of the way that I do torsos, which tends to be more of a rib cage shape. Right, so if I take the width of this for a second, it's approximately, because of the chest isn't facing completely to the front, so it's actually a little bit thinner. So this chest is approximately 2-ish heads wide. I tend to draw my upper torso as more of a rib cage shape to kind of fit Another thing that I tend to do is actually split the midsection in two. I'm gonna have this character sitting. Of course, the hips still going to kind of that underwear shape. When you're drawing the hips, anything of the pelvis, right? You'll always want to think of what it looks like when you wear a pair of underwear. So again, for legs in tandem, I'm gonna draw, because the legs are not in the exact same position, I'm going to draw one after the other rather than them in tandem. I'm going to draw them crossed. This is another position that people tend to find tricky. So because the legs are crossed, you're not going to be able to see the midsection of the underwear shape some more. And then the calf, same deal. I tend to actually draw in these muscles more so. And the ankles are always going to be very, very thin. But yes, and just the foot shape, right? You notice how I'm arranging the shapes to match the perspective of the leg for the foot. And for this next part, right now I can draw the other leg. Because the leg is going to be crossed over, I want to raise this up and bring this leg over this way, like that. If you are uncertain on how to do any kinds of poses, look up references. References are not cheating. References are how you get better. Let's do it. So generally for me, my arms, I don't really do the circle anymore. Well, I do, but I transform it into a shoulder muscle. So I go straight into the muscles. So I have your bicep, usually has two, kind of like that. Let's talk about muscles, why not? Think of your muscles as like a chain, right? They will connect like this. They intertwine just like a chain link, kind of like that, right? So your upper muscles will connect like that of your arm, and your lower ones will connect like that. So that's kind of the full body, not quite so stylized person, but this is more how I would draw an individual. Okay, so I'm gonna draw the same pose, but now more in a very, very stylized fashion. So I keep the neck the same, approximately. I tend to bend it a little bit differently. It tends to be the upper torso that I tend to stylize a lot. So I tend to bend everything a lot. Like I bend like crazy, just because I find that it gives it a lot more of a fluid motion. So this is me sketching like how I'd normally sketch, right? So I connect a lot of shapes. I kind of disregard a lot of stuff that happens. But you kind of notice the difference between something that's stylized and something that's not quite so stylized, right? When you focus more on measurements, you'll always want to go back to these measurements. Quick tip as well, when it comes to drawing a profile, right? You want to make sure that you have enough shape to the front of your face, right? You don't want them to be very flat, right? A tip that I got from one of my college profs was if you draw the face, right? Start from the top of the eyebrow and just draw a straight line down. The face should protrude out quite a bit, right? It should protrude out. It shouldn't be very close to that straight line.
If you want to watch this drawing in real time, check out our live stream replay, link in the description below. I hope these tips can help you the next time you draw a person. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an upload. Join our art community with the links down below, and support us on Patreon, where you can download my working files like this one and get perks like classes and critiques. If you enjoyed this video, here's a couple other videos you can check out next.